There are three main things to think about when making your documents accessible for screen readers. They are alt text on images, tables, and setting the reading order. So there's a few things that we're talking about when we talk about readability and accessibility. The first is about the content, making sure that the presentation is as easy to understand for as many people as possible. The second part is more on the visual side of things, making sure that the presentation is appropriate and accessible, for example, for people with visual impairments, partially sighted people. First thing is about the accessibility of the content. And the first really easy point that I would have here is just to avoid using jargon. It can be easy when you're giving a presentation about a kind of technical topic to use vocabulary that is familiar to you but might be less familiar to the audience. So always think about who the intended viewers or readers of the presentation are, and make sure that you're choosing language that is going to be easy for them to understand. If you do have to use technical terms and jargon, make sure to explain it and potentially have those definitions visible on slide for people to refer to, or an appendix or glossary at the end. Another tip to help make your presentations easier to understand is to think about information hierarchy. That is the organisation and prioritisation of the information in such a way that it makes it easier for the audience to follow what you're saying. The natural reading order in English is from left to right and top to bottom, so try to place more important information, or at least the sort of top level information, at the top of the slide, followed by more details and examples below. By breaking information down into concise bulleted statements rather than a whole paragraph of text, you can also make that text easier to read, easier to understand, easier to kind of keep your place in reading it. Finally, you can use font size, bolding, and even colour to draw attention to key points and establish a visual hierarchy of information that way. So as well as making the content of your presentation as accessible as possible by making it easy to read and easy to understand, you should also think about how to make it easy to read visually, for example, for people with visual impairments. This isn't an exhaustive list, but there are a few things we can think about as first steps to help try and make your documents and presentations more accessible in that way. The first one, and this is actually a general accessibility tip for most people, even people without visual impairment, is to try and make sure that you have enough contrast between the text and the background so that everything is properly visible. There are some fantastic online tools that you can use to check the contrast between different colours, and this means that both when you're looking at something on a screen, or potentially if you have something on a projector that might not have a very good colour balance, you can be sure that people are going to be able to actually read the text and distinguish the individual letters against the background colour. Font size is also an important consideration here, and there's a sort of inverse relationship between contrast and font size, where the better the contrast between the background and the text colour, the smaller you can make the text while keeping it still visible. A second important thing is to think about making your documents and presentations accessible for people using screen readers. Things like PowerPoint and Word have quite good inbuilt tools for flagging problems with accessibility for screen readers, but they're problems that you'll have to understand and be able to fix yourself. There are three main things to think about when making your documents accessible for screen readers. They are alt text on images, tables, and setting the reading order. Alt text is an image description that can be set for any pictures and images in the presentation, so that when the screen reader reaches that point, it will describe the image included. It's important, if you have images that are purely decorative, to either avoid them entirely or mark them as such, so that the screen reader doesn't get confused and try to scroll through each of those decorative elements on the slide in turn on the page. Another important thing to check is tables. The key point here is to avoid merged cells. The way that the screen reader scrolls through the table means that sometimes when you're navigating it, if there are merged cells, it will miss rows or columns entirely. Finally, one of the most important things to check in PowerPoint can be the reading order. This is the order in which the screen reader moves between elements on the slide, so you need to set that to ensure that the person reading it is able to move through them in sequence. This can be a little bit counterintuitive because of the way that it's set up in PowerPoint. The list is almost in reverse, but that's another thing that IG can definitely help you with. If you want help checking your document for accessibility, either on the visual side or helping establish information hierarchy by redesigning slides, we'd love to help. You can get in touch with me via email or directly on LinkedIn.